Well, welcome to another episode of the Business is Mission podcast. I am here with a new friend I met just recently, Brian Albright, who is a professor at Trinity Western University in Langley, British Columbia, Canada. And we met at a Business is Mission Congress that was in Vancouver right at a month ago. And I remember when Brian spoke, I immediately said, okay, Lord, I got to get this guy on the podcast. His story's a great one. Plus, he's just a good guy, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with him. So, Brian, number one, welcome to the show. Glad to have you, brother.
Oh, glad to be here. It's my honor.
So, Brian, I want to get to this part of your story that you shared at the conference. It was really powerful. But before we do that, just give us a little bit of background of who you are, where you came from, how you got to where you are. You weren't born a professor. Your students probably think you were, but you weren't born a professor. You got quite a history of getting to where you are now. And then clearly there is within that history a piece of it I want to pull out and have you talk more about, because I think it's got a message for a lot of us. And then finally, we're going to get to what are you working on now? As you're working with students, what are you seeing, and what's the vision that God's building in your heart as well? So, tell us your story, Brian.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great to be here. I grew up in the Midwest in Indiana, wonderful family, great Christian parents. I was always kind of the entrepreneurial mindset. My dad gave me a lawnmower, and I started my own business, and I paid for college with my lawn service. I was always the top salesperson when we were selling candy for the marching band. I kind of just had that natural bent. I studied business in college. I moved to Los Angeles and went to Azusa Pacific University and really got in there. As I think about my business's mission journey, I kind of think about it not as a career timeline, but really my mindset timeline. After college, my first job was coordinating short-term missions for the university. So for 6 years, I got to travel. And that was my introduction to missions and what God's doing in the world, and even cross-cultural experience. And what I was learning is that what I later learned was an evangelical Gnostic mindset. And what I mean by that is I believe that we were going to heaven someday. The point was salvation, get there, and the earth is going to burn up and die, or it doesn't really matter. And that was kind of my mindset as I exited college. But then I started traveling and seeing poverty for the first time, seeing children die from diseases and people not having enough food. And I didn't have a theology or an understanding of that. I didn't know what God was doing with that. And so over that period of time, doing short-term missions and then moving to Kenya and doing development work for a few years with an NGO, God was really transforming my mind into a holistic theology, where he was saying, that I am more than just salvation for eternity, that the child who dies from malaria is just as much my mission, and the person who has dignity through a job and is able to provide for their family meets a physical need. And I care about physical as much as I do spiritual, and psychologically a dignity of doing work every day. So I would say that was a 10-year period of changing my theology from a non-holistic to a holistic theology. And part of that was doing development work in Africa for a small NGO, agriculture-based stuff like that.
It's interesting, Brian, when you share that, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast can either say, wow, that sort of speaks to me where I'm wrestling now, or we can say, I remember when I kind of went through that same transformation of realizing that it's not just, and this is hard for some people to hear. So I want to ask you a question about that, but it's not something that people, they don't argue with it and says, well, that's not right, but it's so different from, if it's all going to burn up anyway, why worry about jobs? Why worry about clean water? Why worry about health? Let's just save souls, get them to heaven, and it'll all take care of itself. And increasingly, I went through the same transition, and increasingly, begin to realize that it's not that eternal salvation is of less importance. That's clearly not the point. It's just understanding this more holistic is the word everybody uses, but this whole man, whole gospel experience, that God has a lot more on his heart, which is really all that matters. It's not what I think. But I'm curious, a couple of questions. One is, when you were going through the transition, what was the hardest piece of that for you to let go of the old to embrace the new? Was there anything that stuck in your mind that made it just, I got to get through this?
Yeah, the person or the book that walked me through it great. I was studying at Fuller Seminary, and Bryant Myers wrote a book called Walking with the Poor, and it really articulated this as he was doing development work with World Vision, the way we see humanity and see people. And so to say to a person, God cares as much about you physically, your physical flourishing, as much as spiritual flourishing or relational flourishing. I was like going, okay, well, what does physical flourishing mean? Does that mean everybody has exactly the same thing? Does that mean
Mm,
that there's, why do people have disease if God wants us to flourish and not have disease? Like it says in scripture, after in heaven, there will be no more sickness. So are we to be pursuing that? And if it exists here and now, does that mean that we've done something wrong? Or should we still try to pursue it, knowing that it'll never be perfect until Christ returns? We still pursue health here. We still pursue relational dignity and relational flourishing. And
hmm
so it's I guess that was the hardest thing, being a business person, job, wealth, creation, things like that. Well, then what is the goal? And so this sense of flourishing in our material and physical manner is really important to God. And it's not a line that is clear and crossed. It's more, there are lines there. God wants everyone to have a house and security. God wants everyone to have physical health. God wants everyone to have access to medicine and food for nourishment. But it's not like a line we cross that everybody needs to make $5 a day type of thing.
hmm
That's always been a tension within me.
Yeah. No, I get it. And so when you were going through this, I guess, transformation, the way you think,
Sure.
your worldview was expanding and growing. How did your friends take it? Did they look at you like you you've lost your faith, or were they supportive? Because a lot of people, I think, are worried about.
Yeah.
I don't want to become a liberal. I don't want to become,
No.
the old mission drift. The gospel
Sure.
is no longer important. How did they respond?
So I don't think I ever lost the spiritual side. I know that there are people who transition away from it and be like, okay, all that matters is the world, and
Mm,
therefore God is irrelevant and spiritual. I don't think I ever went down that journey. Although the people that I was close to that were worried about me, it was, are you losing the sense? I was working in Kenya. There's 80% Christians. We prayed before every meeting. And this was part of my journey with Business as Mission. As I went to those initial conferences around the 2000s, I was like, I don't belong here because they're talking about church planting and unreached people and evangelism. And I was like, I'm doing business in Africa that's already Christian, so I don't belong in this club. And I felt more at home with social entrepreneurs and people like that. But I did know, I did recognize that it has to be all of it. It wasn't like the poverty was more important than the salvation. Both were essential. And whenever there was any piece missing, God's holistic mission, God's full mission was not being accomplished. And so we need to pursue that.
seems like.
And part of the conversation with the people that didn't necessarily agree with me, I would say, okay, America has a 50% divorce rate. Over 50% of Americans are on antidepressant medicines. So we might be materially wealthy, but we are psychologically poor. We are relationally poor.
Hmm
Africans are actually very relationally healthy in these areas. So how does that adapt to the whole mission? And when I saw people who were pushing back against me, they were saying, okay, yeah, we are poor in certain areas, and this is how we need to adjust our mission to some degree.
Part of the journey in my life has always been, I keep reading these scriptures that were never in the Bible before. I mean, it's like I never saw that before, and now there it is. I know, of course, it was there all along, but God opens your eyes at different times, and part of that was seeing, the Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats, and the distinction were things like you gave me a cup of cold water. You came to see me in prison. I mean, And again, nobody is saying, in business's mission never says give up the heart and soul of reaching the lost. That's absolutely the heart of God. But this is the same God who cares about the widow and the orphan and the alien and the oppressed. I mean, so and that to me is why it's always fresh, because none of us can grasp God in our brain.
Well, the scripture that really spoke to me was 2 Corinthians 8, when it's talking about giving and charity, but it says the sense of equality, that not so that those were hard pressed, but that there was a sense of equality. And so I'm like, does this apply to business? If I have employees that are hard pressed, that their needs are not met, there's something missing about that picture.
Mm.
And so my business attitude should be lifting them to a level of equality, as it says in 2 Corinthians. What does that mean? And how does it apply to business? Never saw that before. Yeah. All I saw was, if you have money, donate it to people who don't have any.
Versus lifting them up.
Much more than that.
Well, clearly you and I could go all day just on this one question, because right, we're looking at a worldview typically of scarcity, and if I raise you up, it has to be at my expense. Well, to a certain degree, that's true, maybe, and it should be, but to a big degree, that's not true. Can I create a more equitable system of wealth generation? Not right. Taking from the rich and giving to the poor, not forced socialism, but how can I create a system, an economy, an ecosystem, if you will, that flourishes right. and everybody can rise? It doesn't mean equal in the sense that we are literally at the exact same level, but there is a level below which no one should have to live. And so can I be a part of creating a worldview and an ecosystem that promotes that? It's really what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And there is a baseline. I believe there is a floor. That's what God means by equality, that there's a sense that people are not hard pressed. Now, we culturally in this time have to determine, what does that mean? What does that look like? And how is it applied? Does that mean we need government minimum wages, or does that mean we as business owners need to choose to make sure that all employees are living at that level? And how do we accomplish that through our market systems? And if our free market capitalism is leading to such inequality and whatever, then we're not doing it right. We need to modify that to some degree.
And the church has something to say to this. That to me has always been the missing ingredient. I can have people will talk about godless capitalism, and I can talk about godless government. The church, the body of Christ, needs to speak into this kind of situation.
Right.
I pulled you off on a tangent. I'm glad I did, by the way. It's a good one. But you're in Kenya. This worldview is starting to develop for you, and so you're moving forward in the pursuit of what God has for you. So look, take us forward.
So the end of that first chapter is more so, I was developing holistic theology. However, the circles I was still running in was, business is still evil and part of the problem, not part of the good. And so therefore, I would say around 2010, I was transitioning. This is when I came back to the US. I started to pursue academics. I went and got my PhD. And I was starting to say, wait a minute, business has got to have a role in this. Development is holism, but how does business accomplish this holistic mission? And so reading Jeff Van Duser's book, Why Business Matters to God, was really transformational in my perspective, seeing the intrinsic value of business alongside the instrumental value. Reading Brian Fickert's and Capek's Becoming Whole was part of that process of me transitioning to, okay, how does business specifically have a role in accomplishing God's holistic mission? And that was kind of the next chapter where I started digging into my research level. And then eventually we moved back to Kenya after teaching for 4 years in Los Angeles. I had the opportunity to move back with my kids, and we worked for a hospice organization that they were a typical nonprofit organization caring for the poor in hospice situation. But we wanted to incorporate business strategies to sustain the mission and the organization financially, but also to stimulate economic growth. So that's when I got to go back to Kenya and participate in as the director of business development. So this was a typical nonprofit mindset, charity-based, saying, hey, don't come here and become part of our nonprofit machine. Bring your business mind and strategies to what we could be doing. And so that's kind of the second chapter of what I got to be involved in, which I felt more connected to business's mission.
So how exciting that they would even ask for that. Usually they'll say to a business people, leave your job behind and bring money and talk to your business friends so they send money. But they're asking you, no, come do business. Come bring business truth, business practices to this world of nonprofit ministry. And what an unusual setting, a hospice ministry, a hospice service, which you charged for, as I understand.
Well, the initial one was not. It was in the village. It was free for the poor. It was very much a nonprofit model. We started a for-profit funeral home alongside of that, which was fee-based. There were times we gave it away for free, but mostly it was fee-based, and that was very profitable. We had all the money returned within 5 years. We were generating up to a third of our budget was funded through the profits of the business at the high point. And so it turned into a successful nonprofit running a business, which was helpful. The challenge was when we wanted to start charging fees for hospice care, we asked the question, is there a market in Kenya for hospice care? Are there people willing and able to pay for what we're providing? And we determined we couldn't do that in the same location. You can't have free beds next to paid beds. And we were out in the middle of a village. So we went to the major town of Eldoret, which is 1 million population, 5th largest town in Kenya. And we built a second hospice, which was kind of my job. I was on a team of wonderful people, and we started a for-profit model that engaged with the healthcare system. We were involved in the National Health Insurance Fund. We were getting referrals from the government hospital, from private hospitals. So we were really moved from a nonprofit mindset to a for-profit mindset while still holding on to our core mission of caring for people through the dying process and their families. So there was tension that emerged, though, between the nonprofit and for-profit model.
So, and that's to be expected. And obviously, you have to navigate that very carefully. And there were probably days when you thought we were doing well, and days when you thought this is never going to work. But I'm personally very much in favor of this hybrid approach, where businesses and nonprofits, for-profits and ministries work not opposite each other, but truly arm in arm with each other, because there is a unique. This to me is reflective of the body of Christ. There isn't a one structure, one model that works in every situation. But if we can humble ourselves enough to see the value in somebody else's perspective, and somebody else's contribution, somebody else's gifting, really we can accomplish great things. And you did. And that sort of led, but it wasn't always easy. That led up to the story you shared in Vancouver. Do you mind getting into that a little bit? Because again, you asked me earlier, personal side, organizational side, and the answer is yes, because that's who we are, right?
Yeah. Let me describe the organizational side a little bit more detail, the tension we were feeling. I felt like as a business person, even though I was invited to be the business guy and keep my business hat on, the nonprofit side was still very much, how do we generate income to fund the ministry? So they saw the profits as why we're doing this. I was there because, yes, we're generating profits for the ministry, but we're creating 10, 15, 100 jobs, and that's stimulating the economy. We have to pay fair, livable wages. We have to have these and we have to be profitable, which means you turn some people away who need your service, and which is hard for nonprofits to do. So there was always this tension of these are customers that are paying, and how do we cater towards that? But those, as you said, the missions aligned. If we made more profit, they were happy. But if we were making more profit, we were creating more jobs. So I was happy. So as long as those things correlate and don't detract from one another, then you have mission alignment and you can do it. But if that tension emerges where it's like we have to choose here. Hire people and pay them well and right, or turn customers away or make profit. When those things come against each other, then that's the challenge that nonprofits face significantly. The other tension organizationally was because we were trying to register with the government, they did not have a category for hospice care. It was just levels of hospitals. And so we were trying to start a for-profit hospice that was caring for the dying, but they were forcing us to create a maternity wing and an operational theater and x-rays and radiation and all this stuff that we weren't going to use just so we could register and be able to participate in the system. That felt very mission drifty because we felt like God was calling us to hospice care. And it felt like a compromise at time, like we're compromising more and more. We're investing money in things that we don't need. But we were going down a road, and I wish that I could say that ended in some great organizational, open-minded, like, oh, God led us somewhere and we were so blind and stupid. No, COVID hit and we shut the whole thing down for a year. And so it's like, what in the world just happened? And my wife and I were basically evacuated out with our 2 kids at that moment when COVID hit, and the future was up in the air. Now, after COVID was over, we did open the hospital and we transformed to a full hospital where currently, 5 years later, it is a functioning hospital that offers all the services. And so the leadership of the organization said, this still aligns with our mission. We're expanding our mission. We're pivoting, I guess you could say. And so the hospital is functioning in a full way. It has reached break-even point a few months, but we still take a financial hit every once in a while. So it's not a financial success 5 years later, but it is still functioning. And God has opened up great doors to care for many people. So that organizational thing is ongoing. Now let me tie it to the personal side. My kids are in high school now. We moved back and we live in the village and we're getting this thing up and running. And I am so passionate about the work I get to do. I'm so excited. It's amazing to, like you say, find the right fit for what you're doing. My kids in high school hated living in the village. We were doing homeschooling. My wife said I can be a teacher or I can be a mom, but I can't do both. And this is not sustainable. And all of the kids that were my kids' age in high school, they all go out to boarding schools. So no one was left in the village that was their age. And after 6 months, we said, this is not going to work. And so we ended up moving to Nairobi so that my kids could go to an international day school there. My wife lived there with them. And I started living the commuter life. So I'd fly up on early Monday morning, fly back late Thursday night. And that was hard on marriage. It was hard on me personally. I didn't feel like I had a home. I'm working up here. I kind of have friends on the weekends in Nairobi, but not really because I'm not there enough. My kids were loving life. Like the international school experience for my kids was, you'll ask them today, it's the highlight of their life. It was so amazing that I'm so glad they got to do that. But it was really hard. My wife, she loved being there, but she was not as passionate about the project as I was, the work. And so anytime hard times came, I was like saying to my wife, come on, we can gut through this. We can make it. And she's like, well, no, this is hard. And so that creates challenges that we faced in our family.
And what did you do? How did you get through it? I mean, I hear you, and it's one of those things, and this is a very common, I'll use the term expatriate because it's broader than just missionaries. It's a very common expatriate experience that at some point the pressures on the family, different components of the family become so intense that it becomes almost unbearable. And I know for you it was very painful.
So
what did you do?
I think in the moment during those years we were facing it, it was just daily decisions, like the decision to move to Nairobi. There was a lot of pain and discernment in that process. And then as I was missing my son's cross-country meets, as I was missing my daughter's, she was in the drama thing and doing plays. And those are just painful moments, and trying to find community. I think I don't know how we got through it during that time. The way we ended up getting through it was not by choice at all. It was evacuation. It was COVID hit, and we got sent home. So it wasn't like, oh, we figured out how to do this
Yeah.
perfectly. It was like we did this for 2.5 years, and we found a way to do it, but we weren't thriving completely. And so if COVID hadn't hit, I don't know what the end of the story would have
Yeah.
been there. I don't know if it would have been, yeah, we figured it out in A, B, and C, and God is amazing. Or if it was like, well, we're moving back home. And that was even more painful than the process we were in, because my kids loved their school, and my son had 1 year of high school left, and we were going back to America. My daughter had 3 more years, and they didn't get to say goodbye to their friends in person. I didn't get to say goodbye to my work employees because it was the airport is closing on in 2 days. You're on the flight, sell your stuff and get out. And I know that's traumatic, and it's not even as hard as some people have been evacuated out before, but it was really a time of come home, really broken people, move back into your parents' house for a few months during COVID where you're locked down, and start the counseling therapy process of how do I understand what just happened
Mm.
there? I'm in the perfect job. My kids are in the perfect school. And now boom, it's gone. And you just kind of go, what just happened? And so that was a challenging time that it's now been 5 years. We've had to really process, why did that happen? I like to say, okay, God created something new and great, and He did. The job I have teaching at Trinity Western is wonderful for me. I love the courses I teach. I'm really getting to tell these stories to students to prepare them to hopefully do the same thing. My kids are in college now. They're thriving in college. They're exploring. My wife is, working here so it's just like it's come around. But I think when we build this notion that God has a perfect ending, a perfect story, and it's all going to be beautiful, that's not been my
Yeah.
experience. It's been, this is painful, but still worth it.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, because so many people, we both know that we have a Christian mythology that, you hit
Hmm.
a hard time, God tests you, you grow, and then He opens a door, and it's even brighter on the other side. Well, that's not always the way it works
No.
out. And I remember a friend of mine years ago, we were studying in the Old Testament together, and about the Israelites that fell in battle. And he goes, kind of stinks to be them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Other Israelites are going on to victory and they're dead in the field. I said, but that's real life. It's
Yeah.
not all happy endings. It has a lot of jagged edges. It doesn't always make sense. It will someday, of course. We do know that.
Yeah.
But and I'll say this for the sake of our audience, what you guys can't hear or see if you're watching this on YouTube, and what you didn't see that I saw in person in Vancouver is, while Brian and his and George, his sort of partner in crime up there, uh, who we're also going to have on the podcast, I hope, because he's got another great story. But as they were sharing with the audience, this 200 very diverse group of, in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of every dimension, gender. Um,
Yeah.
as Brian is sharing and being very vulnerable, two things I noticed. One is there were a lot of people were teary eyed, not because you were trying to be Mr. Tearjerker, you weren't. You were just being real, and so people
Hmm.
were into that. But the other is, I think this must be part of what God's called you to there at Trinity Western, is that you have a way with students. I mean, in that group, out of 200 people, 185 people, I think there were like 60 university students, a few from
Hmm.
Regent, primarily from Trinity Western, and a couple other places as well. And you have an uncanny ability to connect with young people. And maybe you know that, maybe you've always had that, maybe you don't know that, but for me, that's part of what has come out of your experience and the person that you are. The guy that I said, I want to
Yeah.
get to know this guy. I mean, I don't always say that with speakers,
Yeah.
but I did with you.
Yeah.
And so now you're there. You're still processing. Those watching, you can see Brian's face. He's still processing. I mean, this is not a, oh, I'm done. It's cool. I'm going to write a book about it. But you did carry on. You
Mhm.
persevered. You didn't give up.
Yeah.
And that's the evidence of God's faithfulness. What are you focused on now? What are you doing with the students? And what do you see in front of you?
Yeah, yeah, it does get vulnerable. It is a tough spot, and I was fighting everything. I was trying not to be emotional while I was speaking. It was impossible. But I have learned that authenticity does speak louder than experience and success
Mm.
stories and all the accolades and the all the numbers we can project of profitability and job growth and all that kind of stuff. When people are authentic, it's a very powerful tool, and it has to happen organically. Um, I think what's going on now is there's a younger generation of business students who, and I think this is where social enterprise and business mission comes in, is the system gives you two options. It's either for profit or
Mhm.
nonprofit, and there's kind of rules and lanes to stay in. And there's people just, and I'm one of them, I'm just saying that's not good enough anymore. Those two are valuable tools, but they have weaknesses, both of them. And I want to pursue mission at the same time as profit. I want to pursue sustainability financially, but I want to have a cause that is tied to it. And I think people want that, and they don't like the dichotomy that they're being offered. So I think academics and universities are still in this, and even practitioners, missions organizations, nonprofits, they're wrestling with it. And either it's going to change the two options we have so that they become better options, or there's going to be a third option, a third path that's created that we get to pursue and is legitimate. Um, but students are hungry for it. This desire for purpose is it's significant, and if businesses ignore it, they're going to be
Mm.
missing out. And if nonprofits ignore the power that business can be done in the right way, they're going to be missing out. So we're still in this exploratory. What does it look like? But that's the future. And business's mission specifically, I mean, I love the models, but we have got to show that these are legitimate businesses, the ones that are
Mhm.
there. We've got to find a way from an academic research perspective to say they are financially viable, they are hopefully scalable and growable, and we've got to find a way to communicate that if it does exist, and I think it does exist on some levels. It's not just these boutique, and that's not a negative thing. It's not just these small mom and pop shops that are trying to sell some stuff here to generate income. There's some legitimate business strategies being
Yeah.
tried. um, I think that's the future that I want to pursue, is how do we test and understand these so that we can then multiply it.
It's interesting, Brian. There are a number of men and women that I know in the academic circles. I am not an academic, and
Yeah.
I never would be. I don't have the mind for it. But I'm hearing that conversation a lot. We've got to be able. We all kind of know, either we know enough stories to know where there's smoke, there's fire, there's something real here. There's an
Yeah.
intuitive sense of, yes, there's a rightness here. We're coming up to it, but we're not quite there. We're not seeing it. And I love the fact,
Mhm.
this is kind of my view of academia, right or wrong, and I mean it positively. Part of what I view academia bringing to the business's mission movement, and again, I don't care what you call it, business for transformation, holistic business, just call it business. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But a part of what I think men and women like you can do is help us codify what works. Take these
Yeah.
anecdotal things and bring some rigor to them. So they're no longer,
Yeah.
well, that's just Baer's opinion. No, there are 40
Yeah.
cases that substantiate exactly what he just said, or that
Yeah.
challenge what he just said. Doesn't really matter. Um, and I'm excited to see you and others like you and schools like Trinity Western stepping up and saying, you know what,
Mhm.
we're gonna lead in this. We're gonna step out and help make this happen, because sooner or later,
Yeah.
if we don't have that, if we don't have the the academic validation, maybe it's the right word, and the
Yeah.
research, not just of what is, but the research of what could be, I think we're going to miss the
Yep.
boat. You were saying earlier that, business is going to miss the boat if they don't engage these young people. They're coming out, and every generation's kind of like this, but this one is different. I mean,
Yep.
I believe, and I think most people
Yep.
are looking at the Gen Z and saying they're not just rebels looking for a cause. There really is a deeper psyche here that's coming into play. If we don't
Yep.
answer this longing, uh,
Yep.
we're gonna lose them to I don't know what. Where will they go? What will they do?
Yep.
But the
Yep.
good they could do may not
And,
be realized.
and the church has a significant role in this. And what I mean by that is um, if I look at who's actively pursuing cause and mission in their business, unfortunately, most of it is from I hate the term secular, but worldly perspective. You got DEI and ESG and all these things. And my experience with traditional Christian business leaders is they look at that and say, that's bad, that's liberal, that's not coming from Jesus, but they're not offering a replacement
Yeah.
idea. Where is the church in saying, okay, well, the way DEI is accomplished right now is not working because we're not actually engaged in the conversation. So let's get engaged. Let's come up with a better DEI or ESG. Benefit corporations are really exciting to me right
Hmm.
now. And I've learned, as I've seen benefit corporations, I actually see examples of Christians running businesses and I find out they're a B Corp. I'm like going, oh, I got to talk to you. How does your faith influence that conversation?
Hmm.
So if the church doesn't get on board, we're going to be so left behind of something that I think is dynamic.
Well, and it's interesting. I'm working with a project team on a book trying to challenge the church respectfully to do just that. Because what
Yeah.
we're finding our early research, and there's two academics and then me, so somebody's got to make the coffee.
Yeah.
But what we're finding our early indicators are that the church isn't speaking to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is, all right, that's a problem. But where we are finding an openness are in the academic circles saying, all right, we'll speak to it until the church begins to feel like it's okay to speak to it, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how we get there, but I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I met with a brother from Vancouver recently. I met him at the conference, and he was just wanting to figure out what the kingdom purpose of his business may be. And he began to describe it to
Yeah.
me. And it's a manufacturing firm, and it's got got pretty decent size, and it's a neat product. And he was thinking, well, maybe I could expand it. We could go to China, we could go to Vietnam and open up a remote factory and carry the gospel and do all the righteous things there, which is great. I love that way of thinking. But I said, well, tell me about your current employees. Well, his current
Yeah.
employees are a handful of Afghan refugees, a handful of
Yeah.
Indian refugees,
Yeah.
a couple from Central America. And I'm like, and I didn't say it. He got it. He goes, oh, they're kind of right here, aren't they? I said, yeah, God has
Yeah.
brought them to you. Well, the guy he's doing, in his case, he's doing the Alpha course. And some of his employees are actually coming to Christ. These are not won by a missionary. They've been brought by God to his company to work in Vancouver, British
Mm-hmm.
Columbia, and they're hearing and seeing the gospel in real life because of the kind of thing you're
Yep.
talking about. And I absolutely love that.
Yep.
All right, so I guess just bringing this in for a little bit of a landing, at least this conversation, Brian. Two
Yep.
questions for you. One is, what are you focusing on? And then I'll follow on
Yep.
with, I'll ask and I'll ask it again when we get there. What word of encouragement or challenge or instruction
Yep.
would you give to our audience? Now, you don't know them, but you know the general world we're speaking to. But first, what are
Sure.
you working on?
Yeah, so I think at the university for sure, we're just saying, how do we expose students to the broader conversation? I get to do travel studies every summer. We're leaving for Kenya in 3 weeks. We did Thailand last year. So students are getting to see businesses' mission and social entrepreneurs and intentional. I like just using the word intentional business efforts. And so that exposure and having a conversation and opening them up to the conversation, even though we don't have the answers yet, I think that they're being prepared. So when you go get your job, when you go work, here's some of the questions you need to prepare for. And you're somewhat going into a system that's already set and you're going to be pushing against that. So how do we help you push
Hmm.
against it in some way? So I think that that's what I get to do on a daily basis and work in that area. This community, I keep using the word intentional business efforts. What are the things that you can do in your place? We get so overwhelmed by the massive scale of the problems, whether it's human trafficking or poverty or whatever. But the reality is I've got something here. If it's in my purchasing, can I be more intentional about the Christmas presents I buy this year? Can I pursue businesses mission companies selling stuff, or B Corps? Can I demand as a consumer that I want to be intentional about my purchasing? In our employment, when I go into a job interview, can I ask the question, how are you caring for the environment? How are all employees along the supply chain treated fairly? How are you representing Christ in this? Can I ask those questions and choose my job based upon that, and even take a little less profit? My salary is going to be 5% less because it's an intentional business. I'm going to pay 5% more in the products I buy because I want it to know that it's done in the right way. As I invest in companies, am I saying I have to have this as part of what I'm doing? It's not just about maximizing shareholder value, but I want to. And so investors, are we willing to do that and take a little less profit? Sacrifice is necessary sometimes. Hopefully it leads to more, but that's not a promise either. So what intentional areas in my 401k, in my purchasing for Christmas gifts, let me do those things now.
So Brian, I promised you one question at the end, which is, what would you say to our listeners? You've said a bunch already, but you got, and I want them to listen and distill what you've said. But if you had to break it down to a pretty broad audience of people that are either looking at business mission, they're very much that younger generation trying to figure out, is this legitimate, or they're older and trying to figure out, how can they bring it into their existing career or some other alternative. What would you, from your perspective, what would you want to say to this audience?
Sure. Specifically to the businesses missions community that they're pursuing more, is to say, we're still exploring and understanding, and in the entrepreneurial phase, so we have to keep trying new things, and we don't have great answers yet. We don't have clear answers yet. So keep willing to experiment. But I believe that the collision of passion and purpose and business goals of profitability are not dichotomistic. They are real, and it's worthy of pursuing. And so every little step you take to learn and go is worth it, and be willing to embrace the pain along the process and the uncertainty. But we have to have this conversation. If we don't have this conversation, we're just going to lose. God's mission, I believe, is going in this direction. And it's almost like this is what God is doing. Get on board, because this is exciting and it's important, and this is what's happening. So, and be open to question the assumptions that you already have. Be open to saying, maybe I was wrong about that, or maybe I'm not completely right about it, and I need to change my way of thinking. I guess that's for the older generation. And for the younger generation, just encouragement saying, it's happening and you can do it. Don't be discouraged if you get in a situation where you feel like, I'm not allowed to do what I want. The situations are there, and you can't pursue both at the same time. So please keep going down that journey.
All right. I'm going to cheat and ask you one more question. When are you going to write a book about all this?
As soon as I find a partner who loves to write. I love talking and processing. I love the classroom, but I'm not a great researcher. It is so painful for me. So if I found somebody who enjoyed that part, and then we could just talk and it could turn into it, I would be very open to it. But
who knows? I may be introducing you to somebody someday.
Okay.
I like the way you think. All right.
You're welcome.
Appreciate having you on the show, and it's been great just to interact, and look forward to more conversations like this.
Thanks, Mike. Blessings. I appreciate it.
You for sure.